Well, good morning or good afternoon, pre-algebra. Um, it should be Wednesday today, if this all worked out according to plan, and I should not be in the classroom. So instead, you get to hear the lesson via video. So you guys should have picked up this worksheet from the pickup counter. If you did not do that, go do it now. And I will close my eyes as I watch all of you who failed to do the classroom routine get up and go get a worksheet. At the top of the worksheet, please write simple interest. That is the topic for today. And we're going to talk about interest. We're going to do some problems with simple interest, and you are going to take notes right on this worksheet. So when I talk about taking notes, if you turn this over, you'll see that you've got a blank sheet of paper. This is where you are going to take notes. Okay, and I'll tell you what to do. But to begin with, let's take a look at this graphic. We first want to talk about what is interest. Interest is money that's either earned by investing or money that is charged for taking a loan or using a credit card. So I think one of the most tricky things with interest is sometimes it can be a good thing, sometimes it can be a bad thing. So let's first talk about a good thing. If I say that my money is earning interest, that's a good thing. That means the bank is giving me money for investing. So if I invested $2,000 into the bank and I earned $12.50 in interest, that means the bank usually says, if you invest your money with us, we will give you 1% a year. That means every year they're going to calculate 1% of $2,000 and they're going to put it back into my account. Okay, now, just as a review, if we were dealing with the term 1% and we needed to multiply, that would be the decimal 0.01. So 1% obviously is not a real good rate. 3 to 4% investments are good. 10, 15 years ago, you could get investments for 6 to 8%, maybe even further back than that. But interest can be a good thing. Okay, so that's how investors invest money. A bad thing is when you use a credit card or when you take out a loan. So for instance, I charged $500 on my credit card and they charged me $47 in interest. So now I don't owe them $500, I owe them $547. And the way they do that is credit cards usually have a 22 to a 26% interest rate. So take a look at this. Banks give you 1% interest for investing, but when you borrow money using a credit card, you get charged 22 to 26% interest. That right there is why credit cards are such a scary thing. The interest grows so quickly, and it is such a tremendously high rate. Okay? The other way interest could be a bad thing is, let's say that you go to your bank and you want to buy a car, and the car is $15,900. Unfortunately, not many of us have $15,900 in cash to just walk in and give to the car dealer. So the car dealer gets on the phone and they talk to a bank, and the car dealer gets a bank that is going to loan you the money. So the bank pays the car dealer $15,900, and then the bank continues to charge you monthly payments. And they might say, okay, your monthly payment is going to be $350 a month. Well, what they do is they take this amount and they divide it by however many years you're going to take, however many months it's going to take you to pay this off, and they come up with a monthly fee. Now, that monthly fee includes interest. So on your loan, they might give you this money at an 8% interest rate. That means by the time the loan is done, you didn't pay $15,900 back to the bank. You ended up paying, and it's usually something like $25,000 by the time all the interest is calculated in. Okay? So if you can, take a minute, and I would like you to draw this diagram For interest, it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. Actually, if you could make it look like this. Can you briefly write down a couple ways when interest can be a good thing for you, how it can be earning you money, and then a couple examples of how interest can be a bad thing. And at this point I'm going to ask them to pause the video so that you can fill this in, and then I'd like you to share within the class a couple of examples before you start the video again. Okay. And if they want to pause the video on this to see this graphic for you to do that, you may. Okay, well, let's go on to much of today's lesson. Today's lesson is dealing with an idea of simple interest. And we will talk later about why it's called simple interest versus compounding interest. But simple interest is the most basic way to calculate interest, how much you owe on something. Okay, so simple interest is interest that is earned based only on the original investment, and we call that original investment the principal. Okay, so we're going to write that down. Interest earned only on the original investment, we call that principal. Okay, so the formula that you're going to want to write nice and big looks like this. Interest equals P times R times T. Now, do you remember when we were talking about distance, rate, and time? We came up with a formula, distance equals rate times time. And we often called this the DIRT formula because it kind of looks like that. If this was a vowel, looks like dirt. Well, this formula is often used, and it's often called the PERT formula. And if you can think that DIRT, PERT, or P-I-R-T, but as you can see, is this without a vowel looks like PERT. Well, now we need to figure out what these things stand for. The I is the interest that you earn. The P stands for principal, which is the original investment or the original loan amount. R is the interest rate. And it's often referred to as the annual percentage rate, the APR. That's the interest rate that you get every year. And if you, excuse me, sorry about that sneeze. If you start listening to car commercials or finance commercials, at the very end they'll say the APR of 22.5%, and they will announce what the annual percentage rate is. So this rate is going to be given in problems like 8% or 12%. And when you put that in place of the R, remember that you've got to turn it to a decimal. I'm going to give you a minute to write those examples down there. And T stands for the time in years. That's the time that your money sits in the bank and earns interest, how many years? Or it's the time it takes for you to pay back your loan. How many years are you going to be paying on it? Okay, so I'm going to leave this here, and if you can pause the video, and then if you can please check with your neighbor to make sure that you've got all the information that you need. Okay, well, looking at this illustration, let's see how this works. So we start out with our formula, interest equals principal times rate times time, and the scenario looks like this. I invest $2,500 in an account that earns 3% interest for 4 years. So the first thing in these problems is you've got to decipher what's the P, what's the R, and what's the T. Well, time is pretty easy to pick out because it's going to have the label of 4 years on it, or years. The rate is pretty easy to pick out because it's a percentage. And the P is the amount of money. Okay, so if you look at this, we just plug into the formula. Interest equals principal times rate times time. One thing I want you to notice we didn't put for the rate, we didn't put just a 3 in there for 3%, we put 0.03. So if I did this, if I put $2,500 into an account for 4 years, at the end of those 4 years, I would have earned $300 interest, but my total account would now be $2,800. Because I took what I invested, added the interest in. Okay? All right, flip your worksheet over and let's try a couple problems before you guys get going on your own. Okay, so let's look at number 1. Find the simple interest. Can everybody please circle to the nearest cent? When we're talking about money to the nearest cent, does that mean we are going to round something to the tenths place? Does that look like money to the nearest cent? Or are we going to round to the hundredths place? Or are we going to round to the thousandths place? Okay. Which one of those looks like money to the nearest cent? Exactly, $12.58. So we are going to be rounding to the hundredths place here. Okay, so I want you to make sure you write your work out. So it's going to start pretty easy. So we want to remember that interest equals principal times rate times time. Well, as you can see, here's our principal, here's our rate, and here's our time. So I want you to show your work. So we're going to go $13.50 times a rate of 6% for 7 years. So we turn on our calculators. $13.50 times 6% times 7 years. And our interest is $567. Okay. At this time, some of you are probably going to need to get a notebook out so that you can, of paper, so that you can show your work, because that's going to be a little bit tricky. Okay, let's go to number 2 because it throws a loop at us. Right off the bat, instead of giving time in years, it gives us time in 9 months. So we have to figure out, if T is supposed to be in months, how much, or in years, how much of a year is 9 months? Well, we need to do this. 9 months, the part, over the whole year, means our time is 0.75, or 3/4 of a year. Okay. So in this case, our principal is $240. Our rate is 8%, and our time is 3/4 of a year. Okay? Make sure you do the same thing down here for number 4. When it talks about 42 months, we need to figure out if 42 is the part and 12 is the whole, how many years is 42 months? 3.5 years. Okay. All right, down here for number 6, when it talks about compounded annually, we aren't going to do compounding, we are going to do simple interest. Okay, so continue on there. Just want to look out. Alright, so I think anytime it refers to compounded annually, I want you just to change that to simple interest. I will briefly tell you tomorrow what the difference is. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is I would like you to work through this worksheet, and let's do 1 through 23 all. Okay? Very quick calculations once you get it set up. Make sure you're showing your work and make sure that you're turning the rate, the R value, into a decimal. All right, good job. I will see you tomorrow and I expect this to be done. Get your stuff done.